Hey, good morning or evening, everybody, whatever time you're listening. Welcome to episode 93. Very stoked to have my friend Owen Marsden from HootFlight on today. Owen, good morning. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's great to be on with you. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. So, you and I, we've been peers, coworkers for some time now. But I remember when it dawned on me that I wanted to ask you to come on the show. It was when you actually announced on LinkedIn that you and your wife were working on this new website called HootFlight. And I made a little joke. I commented and I said, "Hey, if you ever want to get on a podcast to talk about it, I know a guy, right?" And you shot me a message either, on the work teams, or you shot me a message. I can't remember how, but you're like, "Hey, whoever you know, like, I'd love to get on a show and talk about it." And I was like, "Hey, it's actually me." And and so I'm just so glad to have you on and talk about it, man. Usually I'll kind of unpack what folks do to make it like a warmer introduction, but I just want to kind of start with you kind of telling the audience, what Hoot Flight is, and then obviously we'll get into, how you and Sarah developed it, why you developed it, what you've learned, with having it launched for a few months and all that. But can you just kind of tell us what Hoot Flight is?
Yeah, absolutely. HootFlight is a website for kids. It's educational. It's 100% free. There's no account. There's no friction to getting set up and checking it out. So HootFlight is really designed to give kids more specific information about their flight, um, so that A, they can just learn something along the way, and B, they can get more comfortable with flying, how it works. So it's just designed to provide that good mix of education and entertainment, other than maybe just a tablet video while you're sitting in the airport waiting for your flight.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what, man? I tested it yesterday, and I love how right when you go to the site, it's super clean. It's very simple. You got what's the owl's name? Captain Hoot?
Captain Hoot. Yep,
Captain
absolutely.
Hoot, yes. So you just go in and you had an example of a flight, because like I couldn't remember. I don't have any flights coming up, but I like how you had the little example, like for example DL4347 or whatever. So I just typed in some random flight number and it pulled up, and it had two tickets, going to Boston and coming back. So whomever bought that ticket, thank you. I know you probably won't know who you are, but I started reading the facts, and it talked about what type of jet we were taking, how far it is, what altitude we're going to get to, facts about the city. And I'm just like smiling like a geek, like ear to ear as I'm looking at this. And I shared it with Stephanie, my wife, and I was like, look at this. Like, my buddy and his wife made this. Like, while bringing a new child into the world, while having busy jobs, like, just pulled this together, and it's so fun, man. And I'm just like, I felt this thing inside where I was like, man, we were talking about flying out to California later this year. I wonder if I could just book that ticket so that we could start doing that. And so can you kind of tell us where this all came from? Like, what motivated you and Sarah to start exploring this and building it out? Like, what was the genesis of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been interested in aviation, flying. I worked for Boeing for 7 years right after finishing my undergrad and grad school. And we both, you know, particularly prior to having kids, and Sarah still today for work, travel a ton. So it was just a place where we could kind of lock in with an idea. I have a lot of familiarity with travel aviation, commercial aviation, at least to an extent, where I could kind of sanity check a lot of what we were building in real time, which was obviously a positive trait when you're doing something like this. But the main thing was just that we have now a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And we found that after bedtime, you can't really necessarily go do a big thing, right? You obviously can't leave your kids at home.
That's
Um,
right.
One of you can go do something, but then you're not together. And we were wasting a lot of time figuring out what next reality bad TV show to watch on Bravo or something like that. And there's still a huge space for that in our lives, let's be clear. But I said, well, what could we do that would actually create something and let us problem solve something together? Um, and just sort of be something we could share. And so that's really where we started with this idea.
That is so cool. And it's funny, as I was preparing this morning, getting ready for this conversation, I was thinking about where you found the time to do this. And it's weird. It occurred to me. Maybe it was like a God thing or something, but I was like, I wonder if they did this after the kids go to bed. Like, because Stephanie and I have often talked about that too. And we've experimented with our nightly routine because this, right? There's some nights where you just don't get the kids down at 8 o'clock or 7:30 in those earlier years, 8:30. All my friends have random bedtimes for their kids, but it's up to and including like 9 o'clock for some of them, right? And at the end of the day, you just don't really feel like doing much. And I think that's why the Bravo TV, the Netflix, the Paramount Plus, Taylor Sheridan, all of his shows for us,
Yep.
it's so easy to fall into that, man. And I do say fall into that because that's what it feels like, right? Like I feel usually pretty resigned, pretty docile, pretty spent, exhausted at the end of the night. And we've been married for, gosh, we're going to celebrate, I think, 23 years this year. And so we've had a lot of life together, and we've experimented with, okay, we're both going to read at the end of the night because that's better for our minds to prepare for bed. Or tonight, we're not going to watch a show, or we're going to play a game or whatever together. We've often had our business dreaming time together too, but we've never had a project that we worked on together. And so it really inspired me. I was like, if that's what he says, if that's when him and Sarah started doing this, then that's a charge for me and my wife. Like, because that kind of stuff just like helps me level up, dude. And that's why part of why I really wanted to have you on this show. I always want to show like what's possible. Where did you and Sarah start when you said, okay, we have this idea? What were those first few early days like? Like where did you start exploring? What did you do? What did she do? What are your strengths? How do you play off your strengths and your weaknesses with each other?
Yeah. I mean, her strengths are design, I would say. She is the
Mm,
artist in our family. Um, I am a stick figure, and um, even stick figures is probably a stretch at times. I can
we
maybe make
need stick
something
figure artists.
recognizable. We do, there's a space for that.
Yeah.
Um, but she was really the voice of what does this look like? And as somebody who, again, travels a fair bit but doesn't have that background, she's also sort of the voice of the user to be like, okay, I'm a parent, I'm a mom. Does this work? Is it intuitive? Right. So, from a UX perspective, she kind of has that role too. Um, but then we really just started talking to Claude, and it was interesting, just sort of as we were creating this, new models were coming out as we were creating it. So the tool is becoming more capable literally in the months that we're creating the website, which is also just sort of wild to watch happen. Um, but we were ideating with Claude of like, what could this look like? What are we trying to get to here? And then I knew where the data source was that would actually feed the data into HootFlight. So I could get into it with more of the technical, like, okay, how are we going to reach this data? How are we going to store it? How are we going to generate the city facts and things that you see on HootFlight? So it was really just both the design side and the data side coming together between the both of us.
Dude, that is incredible. Nerdy technical question here because I have to ask because my wife Stephanie, she's been using Claude recently to help with redesigning her website. She's working with one of our dear friends who is a wizard on website design. When you said I knew where the data was, you're not building out a giant spreadsheet. You're not building your own large language model. You're sourcing this stuff from publicly available data, right? So, this is where it gets really nerdy, but like, how did you figure out where to pull the data? And how do you rely on that? Because the site is basically a front screen for all the information out there, right? And it synthesizes it in a way that kids are going to want to see. And as you continue to have this out there and you get feedback from users and stuff, uh, it's only going to get, better, more concise, whatever. You might tweak it, but what was that process like of you figuring out where this data is, and how easy or how difficult is it to pull that information?
Yeah. So the data to answer the question the short way first, the data is
Yeah.
from FlightAware. So
Oh,
FlightAware is a flightaware.com public free website um, where you can track flights and just see some of that information that maybe isn't on an airline app or isn't standardized that way, right? Like you said, there's no gigantic spreadsheet and there's no one
yeah.
sitting like typing in United 303 into the United app or the United website to pull all this.
Right.
But I've used FlightAware for a long time. It's a long-standing website, and they also sell this data that they collect to maintenance operators, private jet companies. Like they monetize it. It's the short answer. And so they have an API that lets you basically access and plug into this data. Um, and just knowing that was all I really needed to get on the Claude side and be like, okay, hey, FlightAware has an API. Here's the API documentation on how you can use this data, how they price it, all of that.
And
Uh,
what's an API for people who don't know?
so an API, and I should actually know what the acronym stands for.
One point I did, bro. I was going to say it, but I totally forgot.
It's a data link. How's
It
that?
is.
It's a data link. It
It
connects.
connects apps and sites, and it's a way to be a conduit, right, to
Right.
information. Yeah.
For
Thank you.
those with an Excel background, it's an XLOOKUP, except on a
Hey.
massive, like gigantic scale of all the data.
Right.
And then part of an API typically is there's published documentation on, okay, here's what this data is, here's how you can link to it, use it in your own application. Um, Obviously, there are different rules about how you can do that. I checked and looked through all that documentation, make sure I was using the data the right way. But Claude also helped a ton with that, right? I wasn't sitting there deep diving this documentation from a technical perspective with the code because I don't have that background.
Right. Right. Um, so when we're talking about, the effort that you've put into this, um, what would you say was your development time? How many hours did you spend doing this? Was it over the course of a few weeks, a few months? What does that sort of effort cost look like when you're building something like this?
Yeah, it was over the period of, I'd say, 2 or 3 months. It was not every night. Um, it was some weeks more nights than not, but that's because we were having fun. Like that, there never felt like a
Yeah.
big price there that we were paying. Um, we also just built a separate AI computer in our house that only has AI stuff. I don't use it for our taxes or for like our personal data. Uh, and so we really felt comfortable sandboxing this and rocking it with a separate just everything. But a couple hours a night for a few months, I don't know, maybe 100 hours, maybe, but I think that's a stretch.
That's incredible. Also, I love how these fun facts are coming out of your answers, like an AI specific computer. Um, is that just a laptop that you guys had? Because I know the term sandbox too, right? And for those who don't know what a sandbox is, it's just a contained development environment, right? Or a contained machine. Something that you're not necessarily putting in everything. This isn't the family computer. It's not a gaming computer, very specific. You got it for AI. So what did that look like? Did you just go get a laptop? Um what did you do for that?
Well, I do like to build desktops. So I built a desktop.
Okay.
And so it's a desktop with its own, it's 2 monitor setup from monitors that we had
Okay.
on an old table. So there's no, it's not the most high powered, but that's just because Claude's doing a lot of that processing server side, right? And this
Right.
website is not doing, I don't want to say it's not that sophisticated because it is, but the magic is not that it's like solving world peace. It's taking data and presenting it a different
Yeah, you don't need a quantum computer yet for Claude, right? Um, and so you're basically, if we're talking about hard costs, you're basically paying for a subscription to Claude, a pro account or premium or whatever they call it, and that's a
20 bucks,
monthly subscription.
20
20
bucks a
bucks?
month. Yep.
20 bucks a month, right? And just a lot of fun and a lot of enthusiasm for this. And I think everybody, that hears stories like this that doesn't know yet what they're that enthusiastic about or what they could build something out of. I think this should serve as a inspiration to people, right? Like, you know, I'm stumping myself a little bit now because I'm thinking about that process of finding what you're passionate about and how it doesn't really need to also be that complicated. It sounds like it was a very natural process for you guys. You didn't have to whiteboard this out of like, okay, we need to spend our time differently together in the evenings. What are we going to do? It sounds like it was just a very natural conversation, maybe.
Right. And this was at the same time that there was a big research paper published that spooked the market. And it was this hypothetical 3-4 years from now, what is the job market going to look like? What can
Mm,
Claude do or AI do? Um, by a firm called Citrini Research that we both read. And again, it kind of got into the zeitgeist where it was on CNBC and the market very momentarily, at least, freaked out about it. And we're like, all right, well, we can sit here and doom about this, which is easy. Maybe there's merit to it, maybe there's not. Or we can understand what's going on, which is a better place to maybe be, see how spooky or not spooky this is, and kind of recalibrate. And also in theory, like long term, I think in the job market, having some experience with this versus not is probably a better place to be. Um, we're not we're not naive. Like long term, if all of white collar work gets automated, then we're no different than anybody else. But being able to demonstrate we understand what these tools are, we understand where their weak points are versus where their strengths are, that can only be a benefit, at least in that.
absolutely. Well, one of the things that's been coming out of a lot of these thought pieces too is that, um, you know, at first, remember the tagline? It was like, AI will not replace your job. You'll be replaced by those who know how to use AI, right? Um, Engineers right now, the engineering field, whether it's, folks who do structural engineering or mechanical engineering, they make products, they're in aviation or consumer products like these fancy watches and phones. They're being told that their future might be managers of systems or managers of engineering systems and AI systems. And so the conversation has been changing a lot. I am very curious about this. Okay, so we could either get into the doom or we could start learning about it. What are those lessons that you learned as you started using artificial intelligence and working with it? To build things? Like, can you just kind of share some of those learnings?
Um, I mean, I felt it was almost freaky at times, right?
Mm,
The quality of how it understood and how it could help us plan. And the big kind of aha we had was we were working a ton in Claude Code, which is the true like generating code for your website, for your app, whatever it might be. But then what most people use most of the time is just the chat, like, hey, I'm trying to do this, like conversational. And talking to chat and asking it how the best way to prompt code was the galactic brain like, oh, um we're saving a lot of usage now. The code tool is this like, Porsche, like fast, almost difficult to control, like um just high performing tool. And chat's like, okay, here's the questions, here's how you need to structure this prompt. here's what you maybe haven't thought through yet. What let's tell it that up front so that it can run and understand what you're trying to do um, in a much better way. And I won't pretend that there's no technical piece to that that we needed to have, right? So there still is, but it can always come up with a metaphor to explain something to you. Or if it starts talking about something you don't know what it's talking about, you just go ask. And that's where it just feels like you're talking to this, like, it's not AGI, but you are talking to something that is very, very smart in a lot of different areas for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of the frustration when people are just starting to use AI is when you start to notice this after a while. Like it's got like this it's like naturally inclined to be just sycophantic, right? Like if you if you correct it, it says, "Oh gosh, you're right. I didn't think about that," or whatever, right? And so to just teach it to not be like that, that's a tactic some people have used, you know?
Yeah, and we would frequently say, poke holes in this idea, or
Mhm.
what are some cons to this approach that we're not considering that we might not be aware of with our background? And it knew that whole side of where we were at. It was like, oh well, a downside could be X, Y, and Z. And then we could talk about whether we were comfortable with that or if there was a different approach we needed to take. Um, they've also done a good job, I think, and I'm primarily a Claude user, of really starting to suppress some of that sycophancy over
Yeah.
time. And I remember when ChatGPT first came out, and I forget it, I think it was ChatGPT 3.0, there were all the things that people found, like you'll ask it how many times the letter R appears in the word strawberry, and it can't count. It doesn't get it right. Um, it's a whole different universe that we're playing in with this now than even then, which was not that.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I've been using Copilot Premium, and it's not the same platform it was 9 months ago. And I think a big part of that is they really, I think they use one of the newer GPT engines in it. But the way that these products, like if for anybody who's listening and maybe tried it in say 2023, like I remember I was jobless in 2023, and that's when there was the big like the monetized YouTube channels where people were
Hmm.
plugging AI code into Canva and it'd make like 300 like 1 minute reels. And there were people that were actually making thousands of dollars in ad revenue on YouTube based on these like fact videos. And it was like there was this whole push in 2023, I remember. And that's where it was really scary. And that might be when GPT-3 had come out, was sometime in 2023. But like for anybody, to get back to my original point, like anybody who tried it and has dismissed it, it's totally worth taking another swipe at it. And I've watched my wife too, start to use it more. And the more she uses it, the better she gets at it. And the better she gets at it, the quicker she gets the results that she's wanting, right?
Right.
Um, so no, that's really cool. Any other lessons you wanted to share about AI that's coming to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have very mixed feelings about AI as a whole, as I think a lot of us do. And I think where the plug can be or the twist can be is how can we use AI to improve our connections with other people versus remove them? And so that's kind of a
Mm,
filter that we put in. Um, I'm not really comfortable with like these people who are having full romantic relationships with AI, things like that, right? I think that's running away from people. Um, but where you can do things like this, where ideally you're connecting better with people, um, that's the use case that I think makes more sense and that could drive us to a better place as a whole. Because I don't know that the right answer is, um, I hate my spouse and I'm leaving them and I'm now in a relationship with Claude, right? I don't know that
mm.
that's necessarily from a societal perspective where we want it.
Yeah, I think us human beings, man, we can either take that approach. We could take so many different approaches, but We are more prone to isolation these days. I think it's a lot easier to be insular, if that's the right word, to retreat. I mentioned feeling really resigned at the end of most nights, where I'm just like, it's not a feeling of like I want to give up, but it's just like I'm tired. I'm tired from literally putting everything on the line today. I mean, for goodness sake, starting my day off with jujitsu, right? It's like I'm already starting the day
Yeah.
off. I need electrolytes immediately, and then a full day of work, being with the kids, trying to make sure that there's quality time with the kids. I think really flipping my mindset to saying like, hey, I have the whole day. And if I'm going to spend, an hour and a half or 2 hours with my spouse in the quiet hours before we go to sleep, how do I want to spend that time? What kind of person do I want to be at the end of the day? Like, and I feel like reflecting every day, did I, make a positive impact on somebody or something in the world, right? That thing that was bugging me about yesterday, did I address that today? Am I continuously improving in my life? Because that's where like the real joy comes from. And then that gratitude. I am curious too about your mixed feelings with AI, man. So, what did you have to overcome, in yourself to start, using Claude more and getting into this project with your wife?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a lot of well-founded concerns about the environmental impact
Mm,
of AI. Um, I think there's well-founded concerns about the job displacement and impact on AI. Um, I'm particularly interested in that I'm not the most artistic or creative person, at least in my own mind. I consume a lot of art that's been made by other people, and I think the concerns in that space are well-founded. Um, so those were kind of some of the things that I carried into it. Um, and I think the good thing is that from the environmental perspective, all the incentives are very aligned in that data centers don't want to use a lot of water. They don't want to use
right.
a lot of power. It's expensive. It's intensive. It limits where they can place the data centers. So I think over time, and I know NVIDIA in particular has been working on more closed loop systems for this that use less water. Um, so I think hopefully that continues to progress where we look back on it and be like, look, these were like the first cars. Of course, they weren't fuel efficient. They were the first ones. And long term, we get to a better place with how that all works. Um, and I'm kind of interested to see how that all plays out too.
Absolutely. That's something that I've been encouraged by too is when you start getting public backlash on things and you start getting people raising the alarms and people are like, gosh, hey, look at the impacts. Look at what's happening. Like what kind of environment are we going to have in 5 years? The conversation really does start to change. And this feels like a hilarious connection to make, but I'm just going to say it out loud. I mean, that's my style on the podcast now. I don't edit. I used to edit probably what I'm about to say. I used to edit parts like this out because they were so random, but I'll never forget this moment when I was into that show Doomsday Preppers. Did you ever hear about that
I'm
show?
familiar. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, it was so interesting from a people watching perspective, obviously, but to see how genius people would get about, if the end of the world happened, what would we need? How would we need to survive? And I'll never forget, there was this guy or this lady, I can't remember, it was a family. In their backyard, they had a pool that they had repurposed as a like I can't even find the word. There's a word for this type of system, but it had like hydroponic growing for vegetables. They had chickens on a net that went over the water. The chickens pooped in the water. The poop helped the right algae grow. They had fish in the pool. Like it was this whole ecosystem. And I again, the more I say about it, the more hilarious it gets. Like I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, Michael, get to the point here. But I've thought about that where like, when you talk about the designers of these data centers and stuff and the people that are thinking about the power and the environmental impact, like these ideas are going to come out like, what does a self-sustaining data center look like? And I know they're not going to have chickens on the roof pooping into the water
Yeah.
that's feeding the data center, but like how do you get smart about energy usage? Like, how do you make resources, in places where people didn't think resources were possible? That's where real, I call it Kaizen, right? Continuous improvement. I have the kanji characters right up there on the wall. That's from my lean background. Like, change for the better comes from those problems and solving those problems. So, um, I think that's valid. And I also think too, a lot of folks don't often think about how, multiple things can be true at once. I love how you use the earlier cars perspective, like, exhaust pumping, the seat belts were terrible, like the fuel efficiency wasn't as good as the cars we have today. Like things get better over time as problems present themselves and they get solved.
Yeah, and that's, one of my other favorite lines that was a Barack Obama line, and I don't know if he got it from someone or somewhere else or not, but just don't make the perfect the enemy of the good, or
Yes.
don't
Yeah.
make the perfect the enemy of the better. Um, and again, I think the incentives are super well aligned on data centers want to use less power and less water. It is good for them to do so. The
Absolutely.
the other thing that's happening is that there are these smaller models that are less resource intensive to run, right? And so as the models get better and better over time, it's going to be the same thing. And Claude already does this where it's like, hey, if you're having a simple, basic conversation about something, use Sonnet. Like it's way less usage against your usage limit. It's way less resource intensive, and you're still going to get roughly the same place. And whip out, now they have Fable or previously Opus, and Opus is still there too, when you really have a tough problem where you need like a large superhuman level of skill set, right?
That I didn't know about this. I didn't know that there were usage limits in Claude. You're talking about Fable, Opus. Are these other engines that Claude has?
Yeah, these are the models that they have, right? So
Okay.
um they are Sonnet is, and they use these kind of code words that are like poems or language, right? So
Yeah.
Sonnet is small, and that's kind of the clue that it's less resource intensive. Um, they have progressed how smart Sonnet is, right? So
Right.
um, you can use Sonnet, and when we pull city facts, that's a reach back to Sonnet itself in the website. Um, for just some city facts, you don't necessarily need Fable, which, as the name implies, is this long, drawn out, or opus, like a full work, right? Like, that's kind of what they're trying to to clue you in there with.
Right. Right. Man, that's very interesting, and that's super cool, man. Yeah, like I feel like this was not one of the expected impacts that this conversation would have on me, but I'm like getting like an understanding of how to use these things and what I should look up when I'm done posting this episode today. I'm absolutely going to nerd out on. I'm going to start diving down the rabbit hole on this. Um, you and I had talked previously about some of the things that you and Sarah had to overcome in doing this, right? Um, I think like analysis paralysis comes into play when we're trying to build new things like this that don't exist. When we're trying to explore our dreams, we really have to challenge like, our beliefs about ourselves and what we're capable of, just things like that. Can you kind of unpack like things that you and her had to overcome, maybe individually, whatever you're comfortable
Yeah.
sharing? I know Sarah's not here, she can't speak for herself, but like you as a couple as well as a team, like what did you guys have to work through? Just challenges.
I mean, the big thing is sort of related to this project, deciding when we were done, because
Wow.
um, I can still go on HootFlight and find this airplane doesn't look quite the way I want, or I'd love to, like, there's more feature to use the code language. There's more features to ship here, right? Like,
Hmm.
um, I would love it if we had custom airplanes so that the airplane, if you were flying on a propeller plane, looked like a propeller model floating across the map.
Right. Right.
Um, or, if you're flying on an A380, there should be 4 engines. Like I have the aviation background knowledge
That's
that is
awesome.
both a blessing and a curse as
I
you
was just thinking that,
try
yeah.
to like actually put this out into the world. And eventually it was my wife who was just like, let's just see what people think and get feedback. Um, but more broadly, it's that same thing of I don't think I can do this or I don't know anything about that. And I think we come across people both in our personal lives and at work who are like, I'm not technical. I don't. The classic one is I'm not good at Excel. Like I don't know anything about Excel. It's like,
Yes.
do you?
I've seen me say that.
And I've never taken coursework in Excel. Um, I don't even consider myself like there's people who code full games and things like that that run in Excel, right? I don't even consider myself really an advanced Excel user. But I said, okay, I have a problem, or I had that infomercial, there's got to be a better way moment. And I didn't say, oh, I should just keep plugging the way I've been doing this. I'll get done eventually. It's more just to like, even before AI, can I talk to someone who knows more? And people usually want to share with you and help you get better at something, always.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's something that I have often. It's funny how often I forget about the fact that there's a YouTube video for everything. I've done that at work. I've done that in business. I've done that with this podcast where it dawns on me. It feels like an elementary thought for me to think because I've been doing things myself my whole life. Like I'll never forget, installing my first car stereo or rewiring my first guitar. Things that I looked up resources online. Like there's a resource for that. And so often there are things that I feel like I personally, I'm speaking for myself, like there's still little strongholds of resistance in my mind. Like if I took my brain and did an exploded view and I looked at all the neurons, there are pathways that I still struggle with to this day. And I've worked on rewiring, I've given up on rewiring, and then I've approached the subject again. And the last 5 years, there's been a lot of challenging limiting beliefs, right? And I it feels cheesy at this point to say it, but I've told people before, like I'll write believe on a whiteboard. I've done it. I did it with one of my previous clients for VAS as well. And I said, look at the word that's in the middle of that, right? It's LIE, lie. Like
Yeah.
there are a lot of beliefs that we hold that man, they just don't serve us. They don't serve our families. They don't serve our coworkers. If we lead people at work, they don't serve our folks that we're trying to develop and mentor. And
Yeah.
we've got to be able to challenge ourselves. And so I love that that you went through that process and you did that. Um, what are you most excited about? Like have you because I know you've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. Have you tested this with, friends, gotten feedback from their kids, other families? What sort of feedback have you gotten in launching this?
Yeah. I mean, I think all in all, the feedback's been positive, and it's been interesting to see that a lot of the things, kind of going back to that previous response, a lot of the things that I was concerned about, people don't notice, don't
Yeah,
care.
right.
They're like, wow, this is just really cool. Thank you. And um, the thing that I think is coolest is the what you'll fly over bit. So depending on the route of the flight, right, it'll tell you roughly how long into your flight a kid might see X. And so we had somebody say, hey, that was right 35 minutes into the flight, like HootFlight said it would be, and it was the Grand Canyon. And so
My
that's cool.
gosh.
And they looked out the window instead of looking at a tablet. So that's where you're like, okay, that's pretty cool. That's worth it. Um, but did I sit there and code in latitude and longitude coordinates for where the Mississippi River is into a code base? I do not know how, and I did not. So that's where I think there's power for ideally AI to help people have human moments, not computer moments, right?
That is a bar right there, man. The power in AI is to help people have human moments. Man, that is so cool. I forgot what I was going to ask you, Owen.
Yeah.
That just that interrupted me in a wonderful way, man. I love that. You know, was there any nerves around like how people would respond? I know what it's like sometimes to, when you burst something and you're like getting ready to write that LinkedIn post, like what was that like for you and her, like announcing that?
Um, a little bit, but it was also free and we thought it was cool. We didn't have the pressure of like, this is our big side hustle and I've quit my job and what's next and I hope people like it and I need to hustle and sell it. Like it's all of this very organic, like this is something that we did and would love it if you checked it out. And if you're too busy or don't want to, love that for you too. And that reduced a lot of that pressure too. Um to where there wasn't a whole lot of trepidation. It's also not a side hustle that really conflicts with or has a lot of overlap with our actual careers. So I don't, or we didn't have a lot of fear of like, well, is this a little awkward or what's going to be an employer
Right.
response or anything like that? Because it's not in that realm for either of us. I think again, it's just kind of demonstrating a broader, like, this is how we think about things that's applicable, no matter what the specific career space actually is.
Man, I love that. And I know you and I were talking about that yesterday too, about how you can't really even classify it as a side hustle. There's nothing hustle about it. It's like it's a fun side quest. It's something that you got to do together to see what you're capable of when you work as a team. It's a huge relationship builder for you and your wife, right? And then it's also this thing that it's just going to connect people, like you said, in a human way to what they're already doing. They're having flights. You might as well unpack why that's really cool and why it's such a privilege to get into a plane
Yeah,
and fly, right? Like our ancestors didn't know what that was like, right? Um, I love how it's just fun. There isn't that pressure. And I do feel like that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs could learn from, man. Like um folks like me, I'm preaching to myself right now. I'm speaking this word to myself. Like when I launched my business, it was like there was that pressure to feed my family, you know? And I think of my mindset when I launched that, and as I'm approaching it again, I'm looking at kind of revamping the marketing and, new products and things like that. But like having that attitude of like this needs to be fun, because if it's not fun, it's going to feel like extra. It's going to feel like another hustle on top of my myriad of hustles that composes my life right now.
right.
And there's a lot of things that we hustle about that really shouldn't and should not. Same word. I just basically
Yeah,
express it in two different ways, but bringing that sort of wholeness of like this is just fun. Check it out if you want. If not, we get the pride in knowing that we made this together, and
yeah.
it's a lot of fun.
There's also a beauty in it in that, we use it enough to make sure it still works on a routine basis. Like that's
Yeah.
obviously important. Um, but in terms of ongoing maintenance, if we want to add more, we can. It's always there. There's not a whole lot to do. Like, things break and I can check and see what happened and it's easy to address that. But we can also move on to the next thing we want to try now when we're ready. Like, and this is sort of in a good way, it's just there. And so we can always look back on it and show it to people. But there's not a whole lot of like, oh, we're running a software company now and we're not, because we're not charging for this and we don't even have a place set up for donations. Like, there's no like money component of managing money and accounting and all the things that come with that. So it's this sort of thing that lives in time now, and just knock on wood, largely just works, and so that part of it is fun too.
Yeah, you reminded me just now of something that you said yesterday, and then when we were talking, and then something that also came up about 5-10 minutes ago when you talk about we haven't monetized it. We're not taking donations. For the people who might be listening going, doing what most of us people do is go, gosh, this is genius. They could make money doing this. How could they make money doing this? Like, what do you have to say about your guys' heart, your posture about this? We talked about it being for kids, right? And why it's not monetized now. And then, can you kind of explain your position on that? I think that's
Yeah.
important for people to hear.
I'm not serving advertisements to kids, so that's a ground rule, like, number one. No, thanks. I wouldn't want my 3-year-old to go on the site and see an ad targeted at him. So it's a very easy kind of moral code thing there. Um, getting deeper into it, we thought about having accounts, and we wanted to add a feature where kids had a passport and they could add places that they had been that I think would be really cool. And maybe we'll still find a way to do that someday. But you also get into all the cybersecurity implications of having a password, having a username, all the things that come with that are complex. And those are places where Claude can generate code, but where there are those implications, I have more concerns about my ability to understand that we're doing everything the right way from a security perspective. Um, and so you sort of reach this fork in the road where it's like, if I want to monetize this, I need to follow security standards. I need to go and potentially hire someone either on a freelance basis to go look at this code base in ways where we're like, well, we actually also want to just get this out there. And maybe it's easier to just avoid that for right now. And sure, if it like went viral and there's hundreds of thousands of people using this who want to go add that functionality, then great. Um, we do also have a small little contact us at the bottom to go say, okay, if you want to reach out to us and you think we're brilliant, or like you can, like we're findable. But beyond that, it's just not. We're in a place where we don't need to monetize it. It also does not cost some unfathomable amount of money that we're spending to do it as a passion project or anything like that. So I want to put that out there for people too. And so it's just easy to not go that route.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying. We talked a bit about it yesterday, and I said, hey, I'm going to save more questions for the show. But I just have to tell you that as a fellow man, a fellow father, that I appreciate that there are folks like you that are developing things like this, that are mindful of things like security, of children accessing these things. I'm not going to name any of the games, but we've had a tablet for one of my daughters, and man, I made this thing like as much Fort Knox as I possibly could as far as security goes. Like, and I used all the Google family settings, all that. But there was a game that she had that was free, of course, because the developer gets ad revenue, and some of those ads that were coming through are the types of ads that on the Super Bowl, I will turn the TV off, or I'll say, hey kids, let's go over here, or
Yeah.
whatever, because there are certain things that I believe kids should not be exposed to at certain ages, right? And I'm, not really going to get into that stuff, but that's the fact that I did not have that ability to be there with my kid the first time they saw certain things or whatever. That is something that not enough parents, I think, are thinking about when they just pass the tablet to the child. And I don't say that to place judgment either. I want to make that very clear that when I'm talking about parenting stuff on this show, I don't expect like all of my friends, my family members, our listeners, people who have been with the show for the last almost 3 years to expect that I expect the same thing out of them in parenting their kids. I think that we all need to make the best choices. There's no manual for this stuff, like we're learning on the examples of our friends and our parents and all that. But as a man that cares about that, I just want to say thank you, man. Thank you to you and Sarah for being so mindful about it. And I just think you're in the right place for this. You're in the right mindset. you're thinking about all the things. The fact that you have thought about this stuff and then you've launched it in 3 months too, like that feels like an oxymoron too, right? Like people that can like understand the implications, but then say, we're going to do progress over perfection, and just go. That that is a beautiful place to be, man. I'm so proud of you both for getting to that, you know? There are things that I haven't launched that I still haven't launched that, I mean, you're inspiring me to figure out, And maybe figure out's the wrong word. Maybe it's just to just go on and see what happens,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And I think, going back to your parenting point, right? You don't know what what the previous part of their day looked like to get to the point where they're doing something that you're judging as a parent yourself. And I try to
Absolutely.
remind myself that sometimes too. And it really helps me say, oh boy, like, you know, that kid is getting to do X. I don't let my kids do that. But who knows like what the story of
Seriously.
that day has looked like to get there. So that helps me on that side too.
Absolutely.
But it is tough kind of going back to that point of just watching football and you watch CBS or Fox and there's no in the afternoon, right? This is not 9 o'clock at night. And there's just no real filter for like, here's FBI Las Vegas with a
Exactly what I was
gun.
thinking when you said that. Yeah. They
And
cut it off right before the guy's head gets blown off,
and
right?
it's like I can't my 3-year-old is certainly now at a stage where you now get to have the conversation. And I'm certainly not this content shouldn't exist like purist,
Same.
but there's plenty of ways now for people to get to it, learn about it that are maybe not an ad during the Chiefs game. But that's where we're at. So it does place the burden back on the parent. Either you can't watch football or you just have to like mindfully mute everything, but the images are still there. Like it's a whole thing.
Exactly.
It's a whole thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it sounds like you and I, if we were watching a game together with our kids, we might have some of the same approaches there. But yeah, it's true. And my wife and I too, I will say we don't blame the world for going the world's way, right? Like I'm not gonna get mad that the stuff exists. And I mean, I've seen every John Wick movie. Let me be very clear. I love a John Wick movie, okay?
Yeah.
But so I don't think that it's not that I don't think that stuff shouldn't exist. It's just and it's funny too. Stephanie and I, we have to remind ourselves, we're 80s kids. We grew up in the 90s. And in the 90s, man, I mean, Gremlins was a Christmas movie, right? Like Terminator, I saw Terminator and Terminator 2 at 6 and 7. Should I have seen that stuff? I don't know. I can't change it now, but
Yeah.
it's like we all have, every generation has something that, you work through and you figure out, and it's just part of life. So um man, so we I think we covered everything we wanted to kind of talk about today. Is there anything that you wanted to kind of sign us off for today, Owen?
No, just thank you so much again for having me on. I really just appreciated the time and the conversation. I had a lot of fun and thought about some things some different ways on my end too. So that whole aspect of it was just awesome. So thank you for this forum and this space is the main thing I would say.
Man, thank you for coming on, dude. I'm so pumped to use HootFlight on, our first flight. I think about we're going to Colorado in a couple weeks and we're driving. I'm like, damn it, where's Hoot Drive,
Yeah, well no, Hoot Drive's a good idea. I like that.
Hey, dude, maybe we just figured that out, right?
There you go. I like that 'cause we road trip plenty of the time too. So
I know, right? Well, and that's the thing. I think that's one of the coolest things about HootFlight that I love is that, I said it earlier, people are flying anyway. Like, how can you make that experience not just a boring thing? Like people who hate flying, for example, it's like they hate flying because of previous experiences. Maybe they got sick on a plane, maybe they takes them an hour to get through security or whatever, but it feels like it's taking something that is absolutely, I do think, taken for granted, the fact that we can fly and go places, and it's just unpacking this layer to it. It might be a new layer, but it's nothing new. It's all these facts exist, but you're finding a way to synthesize them in a way to where kids are going to get pumped on that. And I've been joking lately on the show. Like my last episode, I talked about how, dinner time with the kids has been fact hour,
Hmm.
hey, what kids asking us, why do hippos lay in mud? And we know the answer, but we're like, why? So we can hear our other daughter answer the question. Or, what's the
Nice.
strongest muscle in the body? You know, and I'm thinking, hey, does anybody know what kind of plane we're taking tomorrow? How many engines does it have? What are some facts about the city that you learned, and how we could actually use HootFlight a month in advance
Yeah.
and make it trivia? Like,
And,
there's just so many ways that you could use this.
and I'll put in a big plug for when you first get there, you can type in a specific flight number, or you can click Explorer route. So
That's right. Thank you for
even if
highlighting
you
that.
don't have a flight coming up, or you just want to learn about a specific place, click Explorer route. You can go, there's more information there that's not specific to an airplane, which is the part that, for obvious reasons, you don't have a flight, there's no airplane. But you can still learn about what you might fly over or things like that on the Explorer route tab.
Absolutely. And so, on that note, before we sign off, Owen, tell our listeners, I'm going to put your info in the show notes, of course, too. So anybody who's accessing on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, you can go to the site. But can you tell us how to connect with you and how to leverage the site?
Yeah, so it's hootflight.com, HOOT flight.com. And if you want to get in touch with us, there's a contact us at the bottom that's got a link to email Sarah and I. So we'd love to hear from you about what you think about HootFlight.
Absolutely. Owen, such a pleasure, man. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Michael.
All right, everybody, you know what to do. We'll see you next time.